What have we forgotten? In a world of incredible scientific knowledge, of data, of analysis, and of power over the natural world, have we lost another, older, and perhaps wiser way of knowing? What if the trees, the plants, the rivers, and the land itself had something to teach us, if only we remembered how to listen? In her luminous and life-altering book, Braiding Sweetgrass, the botanist and writer Robin Wall Kimmerer offers us a path back to this forgotten wisdom. This is not a book of science in the traditional sense, nor is it just a collection of ancient stories. It is a work of profound and healing philosophy. Kimmerer, as both a trained scientist and a member of the citizen Potawatomi Nation, stands with a foot in two different worlds, and from that unique vantage point, she weaves together two different ways of seeing, two different languages for understanding our place on this planet. Braiding Sweetgrass is her act of braiding three sacred strands: the rigorous, objective knowledge of Western science, the deep, relational and ancient wisdom of indigenous peoples, and the living, breathing teachings of the plants themselves. This is not a book about saving the planet, it is a book about falling back in love with the planet, and in doing so, remembering our place within it. It is a journey to remember what our dominant culture has worked so hard to make us forget: that the earth is not a resource to be owned, but a relative to be loved, a gift to be cherished, and a teacher to whom we owe our deepest attention. The Braided Path. Weaving two ways of knowing. To understand the heart of Braiding Sweetgrass, you must first understand the woman who wrote it. Robin Wall Kimmerer's life is a braid. She is a distinguished professor of botany, a scientist who understands the world through the precise language of taxonomy, of photosynthesis, of ecological systems. She can look at a forest and see the complex, data-driven dance of competition and symbiosis. But she is also a woman of the Potawatomi Nation, an inheritor of a different, much older way of knowing. This is a worldview that sees the world not as a collection of objects but as a community of subjects. In this tradition, a forest is not a natural resource, it is a council of standing persons. A river is not a body of water, it is a living being with a spirit and a voice. This indigenous wisdom is not based on dissecting the world into its smallest parts, but on understanding the relationships between all things. It is a science of the heart, a science of connection. For much of her life, these two ways of knowing were in conflict. When she went to college to study botany, she was told that her indigenous perspective, her belief that plants had their own intelligence and gifts, was unscientific, a form of sentimental anthropomorphism. The world of science demanded a cool, objective detachment, but her heart knew that her people's wisdom was also a profound truth. Braiding Sweetgrass is her beautiful and successful attempt to weave these two strands together. She shows us, story by story, how scientific knowledge and indigenous wisdom are not opposed but are complementary. They are two different languages telling the same story about the world. Science can tell us how the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, work together in a field, fixing nitrogen and providing structural support. Indigenous stories can tell us why they work together, as a model of a generous and reciprocal society where each member gives their unique gifts for the good of the whole. The book is a powerful argument that to solve the great ecological crises of our time, we need both the analytical power of science and the deep relational wisdom of indigenous thought. We need, as she says, to see with two eyes. The honorable harvest, an ancient code of ethics for the earth. So what does this indigenous wisdom look like in practice? At the heart of the book is a set of principles that Kimmerer calls the honorable harvest. This is not a set of rigid laws but a code of conduct, a moral framework for how to be in a just and respectful relationship with the living world. It is a powerful antidote to the consumer culture of taking whatever we want, whenever we want. The first rule of the honorable harvest is to never take the first. When you come across a patch of berries or a stand of medicinal plants, you never take the first one you see. That one belongs to the Creator. The second rule is to ask for permission. Before you harvest a plant, you ask its permission. This may sound strange to a Western mind, but it is a profound act of respect. It is a recognition of the plant's personhood, of its own life and spirit. You quiet your own mind, and you listen. The answer may come in a feeling, in the way the plant looks, in the presence of insects or disease. Asking is a way of entering into a conversation, not just a transaction. The third rule is to take only what you need. This is the core principle of sustainability. You do not hoard. You do not take more than you can use. You leave enough for the plant to sustain its own population, and you leave enough for all the other beings, the birds, the bears, the insects, who also depend on that plant for their survival. The fourth rule is to use everything you take. This is a deep act of respect for the life that has been given. If you take the life of a deer, you use the meat for food, the hide for clothing, the bones for tools. You do not waste the gift. You honor the being that has given its life to support yours. The fifth rule is to share it with others. The gifts of the earth are not meant to be hoarded by individuals. They are meant to flow through the community. Abundance is only abundance when it is shared. And the final and most important rule of the honorable harvest is to be grateful. You give thanks to the plants, to the animals, to the land for the gifts they have given you. This gratitude is the foundation of the entire relationship. This simple, beautiful code of ethics stands in stark contrast to the logic of our modern market economy, which is based on the idea that the earth is a collection of private property and natural resources to be extracted for maximum profit. The honorable harvest offers a different, more ancient and far more sustainable path. It is a philosophy of reciprocity, the grammar of animacy, speaking a language of respect. Why is it so easy for our modern culture to treat the earth like a thing, a resource to be used? Kimmerer offers a brilliant and profound answer that lies deep within our language. In English, she explains, the world is largely divided into objects. A mountain is an it. A river is an it. A tree is an it. We treat the living world as a collection of things, but in her native Potawatomi language, and in many other indigenous languages, this is not the case. The language is structured by a grammar of animacy. In Potawatomi, a living being is not defined by whether it is an animal or a plant, but by whether it has a spirit, a life force. And in this language, a huge number of things that we would call objects are, in fact, grammatically and philosophically, beings. A bay is not an it, a bay is a who, a stone is a who, a raspberry is a who. This is not just a quaint linguistic quirk, it is the reflection of a completely different worldview. When your language itself forces you to acknowledge that the world around you is a community of living, intelligent and spirited beings, it becomes much, much harder to treat that world with disrespect. You cannot clear-cut a forest of people as easily as you can harvest a stand of timber. You cannot pollute a being as easily as you can dump waste into a body of water. Kimmerer argues that the loss of this grammar of animacy in languages like English is one of the root causes of our ecological crisis. We have literally written the personhood out of the world, and in doing so, we have given ourselves permission to objectify and exploit it. The journey back to a healthy relationship with the earth, she suggests, requires us to relearn this language of respect, to begin to see the world not as an it, but as a thou. The Council of Pecans and the wisdom of a gift economy. One of the most beautiful illustrations of this different worldview is a story Kimmerer tells about a pecan grove. Pecan trees have a strange and wonderful way of producing nuts. They don't produce a steady, predictable crop every year. Instead, they operate on a cycle of massed years. Most years, they produce a modest crop, but every few years, unpredictably, all the trees in a region will synchronize and produce a massive, overwhelming, and ridiculously abundant crop of pecans, far more than all the squirrels, birds, and humans could ever possibly eat. This, she explains, is a profound lesson in a different kind of economics: the gift economy. Our human market economy is based on a principle of scarcity. We believe there is not enough to go around, which creates competition and a need to hoard resources. The pecan trees and the natural world in general operate on a principle of abundance. The pecans are a gift. They are given freely and generously by the trees, without any expectation of a direct transactional return. This gift creates a web of relationships and responsibilities. The squirrels get their fill, and in the process of burying the nuts and forgetting where they put them, they plant new pecan trees. The humans who gather the pecans are filled with a sense of gratitude and an impulse to share their bounty with others. The gift, unlike a commodity, gains value as it flows through the community. Kimmerer contrasts this with the logic of the market. If a human were in charge of the pecan grove, they would try to manage it for maximum, predictable yearly profit. They would break the natural cycle. They would see the pecans not as a gift, but as a resource to be owned and sold. The story of the Council of Pecans is a powerful philosophical parable. It asks us to consider what our society would look like if it were based on the principles of the gift economy, on gratitude, on reciprocity, on the belief in abundance, rather than on the principles of the market economy. It is a call to see the world not as a marketplace but as a gift that we have a sacred responsibility to care for and to pass on. The Three Sisters and the Power of Reciprocity. Perhaps the most famous example of indigenous wisdom in the book is the story of the Three Sisters. The Three Sisters is a traditional agricultural practice where three different plants, corn, beans, and squash, are planted together in a single mound. To a modern monoculture farmer, this looks messy and inefficient, but it is a work of ecological genius and a profound philosophical lesson. The corn grows tall, providing a strong stalk for the bean vines to climb. The beans, in turn, are nitrogen fixers. They pull nitrogen from the air and convert it into a form in the soil that the corn, a very heavy feeder, desperately needs. And the squash, with its big, sprawling leaves, spreads out on the ground, acting as a living mulch that shades the soil, keeps it moist, and prevents weeds from growing. Each of the Three Sisters gives its unique gifts, and in doing so, they create a community that is far stronger, more resilient, and more productive than any of them could be alone. They are not competing with each other for resources, they are helping each other to thrive. Kimmerer presents this as a powerful metaphor for a different kind of society. Our modern capitalist society is often based on a model of competition, of individualism, of every man for himself. The Three Sisters offer a different vision. They offer a vision of a society based on reciprocity, on mutual aid, on the understanding that our greatest strength comes not from our individual success, but from our ability to support each other. The final beautiful message of Braiding Sweetgrass is one of profound and defiant hope. In a time of ecological crisis and cultural despair, Robin Wall Kimmerer shows us a path forward. It is a path that requires us to braid the strengths of our modern scientific minds with the deep, ancient wisdom of our hearts. It is a path that asks us to shift our perspective from one of human dominance and ownership to one of humility, gratitude, and belonging. It is a guide to falling back in love with the world, and to remembering our sacred responsibility to care for the gift of life. It is an inquiry into what it means to be a good ancestor. If that is an inquiry that speaks to you, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to learn from the deep and beautiful wisdom of the earth together. This gratitude is the foundation of the entire relationship. This simple, beautiful code of ethics stands in stark contrast to the logic of our modern market economy, which is based on the idea that the earth is a collection of private property and natural resources to be extracted for maximum profit. The honorable harvest offers a different, more ancient, and far more sustainable path. It is a philosophy of reciprocity. The grammar of animacy, speaking a language of respect. Why is it so easy for our modern culture to treat the earth like a thing, a resource to be used? Kimmerer offers a brilliant and profound answer that lies deep within our language. In English, she explains, the world is largely divided into objects. But in her native Potawatomi language and in many other indigenous languages, this is not the case. The journey back to a healthy relationship with the earth, she suggests, requires us to relearn this language of respect, to begin to see the world not as an it, but as a thou. The Council of Pecans and the Wisdom of a Gift Economy. One of the most beautiful illustrations of this different worldview is a story Kimmerer tells about a pecan grove. Pecan trees have a strange and wonderful way of producing nuts. The Three Sisters and the Power of Reciprocity. Perhaps the most famous example of indigenous wisdom in the book is the story of the Three Sisters. The final, beautiful message of Braiding Sweetgrass is one of profound and defiant hope. In a time of ecological crisis and cultural despair, Robin Wall Kimmerer shows us a path forward. It is a path that requires us to braid the strengths of our modern scientific minds with the deep, ancient wisdom of our hearts. It is a path that asks us to shift our perspective from one of human dominance and ownership to one of humility, gratitude, and belonging. It is a guide to falling back in love with the world and to remembering our sacred responsibility to care for the gift of life. It is an inquiry into what it means to be a good ancestor. If that is an inquiry that speaks to you, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to learn from the deep and beautiful wisdom of the earth together. Subscribe, and let's continue to learn from the deep and beautiful wisdom of the earth together.